Guys, wait a second. Unfortunately, I was just told by the chat that Steve's muted, but that means that everyone is muted right now, beside me. And give me a second. I have to figure that out. That's bad timing. I haven't recognized that before. Sorry for that. Okay. So to a question to the chat: is only Steve muted, or are the others also muted, like Luke? Yeah, so my sound works for of course, because I go through a direct microphone, but it seems like the Skype sound is not going through right now. Ah, damn. Yeah, because they hear me now. Give me a second. I think, wait a second, I think I know what it is. Give me just a second. Okay, guys, can you say something, please? Okay, yeah, that was that. Now I also know why my sound of you guys was so bad, because my headphones were connected in hands-free mode and not in stereo mode. So now everything should be fine. Yeah, let's just wait for the chat to confirm that your sound is hearable now. No, not yet. It takes a while until it's shown on YouTube.
Without sound, so that's.
Wait, we lost Luke.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay, no, still something wrong. I switched. Yeah. Okay, sorry for that delay, guys. I don't know why the Skype settings are completely reset. Okay. Wait a second. We will start from the introduction as soon as this is working. Okay, now I switched that one. Can you say something, guys? Okay, still not working.
Oh, someone's saying they heard me. Should they have been able to hear me?
If everything is fine, then they should hear you. Can you say something again?
Hello, guys.
Yes, now it's working. Okay, great. I see the bar moving, so everything seems to be fine now.
Is the bar moving for me now?
Yeah, it moves for all of you.
Okay, good.
Are we moving to the bar?
Okay, Steve, now you can start again with your amazing introduction.
They can't hear.
It was brilliant too, by the way, what we were saying. Okay, so we can count me down, Mark.
Yeah, it's fine. It's running. Just start over again.
Hey everybody, welcome to Wing Talk. This is a special episode of Wing Talk today. It's radio. It's a radiothon. But even more important, just 24 hours ago, we had INAV 3.0, the first release candidate, drop. And I'm sure you want to know everything there is to know about INAV 3.0, and how you get it on your plane and how to get this release candidate going for you. So Marc Hoffman has stayed up all night last night making sure that you know everything you need to know before you go out flying. So he'll be on shortly to discuss it. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for hanging in there. We had some technical difficulties. We were doing the show in German to start off with, and it was going great, but we decided maybe we should stick to English. So we are now back live and everything's going once again. Anyway, today we are going to talk also to the extreme about the wonderful world of radios with Darren. Darren's going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting today. But first, my co-host and partner in crime, Luke, what's going on, babes?
They're saying we're very quiet.
Yeah, I'm still trying to fix that and getting louder.
Is it getting louder now?
It's getting louder.
Okay. So Luke, what we're gonna need today is have you like man the microphones.
Me to
man the chat, I should say.
Okay, I'll man the chat.
Because we're gonna have questions coming through quite often. Marc's gonna be doing a lot of talking to start here, so I was wondering if you could do that.
Yeah, chat will be my responsibility for today.
What's your screen name on this chat, by the way?
What's that? What's my?
Yeah, is it Luke, or are you like Fluffy Kitten or something like that?
Oh no, it's just Luke Atabato. Yeah, just my full name.
Okay, so they know who you are.
Nothing too exotic, unfortunately.
Speaking of Fluffy Kitten, we're checking in with the monthly growth of your hair because you're not shaving or cutting off the hair until you're out of lockdown, which is what, June 21st, you said?
Yeah, June 21st, it's looking like at the moment. I had a joke, a bet with some friends from school that I wasn't going to cut my hair until we're fully out of all the lockdowns here in the UK. So it has now been, 5 years or whatever since the first coronavirus lockdown, it feels like.
So what's the hair going to look like after June 21st? Is it going to be like a buzz cut like what Marc and I are sporting?
Yeah. I may shave it off completely.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
You'll be wearing baseball caps the rest of the year until it all grows back. But it grows back beautifully. Speaking of somebody who's had long hair for a very long time, is none other than Darren. Darren, what's going on, man?
Oh, yeah, it's all good. Now people can hear us. It's brilliant. But yeah, my lockdown probably started when I was about 15, 16.
Well, Henrik's saying the sound is still off a bit, maybe.
Yeah, I have already boosted the system sound by 200% right now, but it's still quieter than I am a little bit. But I can dial down
better?
my volume. No, it's not because of you,
It's
Steve.
not this at all, okay.
But I can dial down my volume, so now the people can raise their output volume, and we are around the same level. I hope that helps. So sorry for that, guys. I don't want to mess too much with it right now. So I hope this is okay. So just put your volume a little bit louder. I have made the chat, the guys and me on this around the same level now.
I haven't touched a thing. We all sound brilliant. That's so. Hey, I was going to ask you, Darren. I had been invited. I bought a used Bixler 3 from somebody who wanted $60 and a penny for it.
Oh,
and I wrote him back.
That penny, that just pushes it over, I think.
Yeah, I wrote him back. I said, I'm not going to pay over a penny over $60 for this plane. And I didn't. But anyway, so the guy said, a wonderful guy, and he said, hey, I got this flying group at a local high school. I want you to come join. And I go out there, and it's just been great. I have Demo 7, who's that YouTube vlogger. He's part of the group. It's Jeff Yang. And great bunch of guys. They're all line of sight pilots. A couple guys fly FPV, but no one's like doing INAV quite yet. So they're called the Sunday Fun Day Flyers. I want to give them a shout out because they're a great bunch of guys. And thanks for having me. So that's why I've been seeing them, like the Draco show up and things like that are not normally on my radar. What I've noticed though is like the guys will come out and they have a cart and they'll have like 5 planes on the cart and they bring them out, and it's kind of like they fly about 60% of the time and BS about the other 40% of the time. So is that what the funny farm is like?
No. Well, I've only been there once. There's a lot of BS, obviously, but no, there's a lot of flying, a lot of crashing into each other, and yeah, that just have a massive laugh, to be honest. I mean, when I went, it was really quite windy, so it wasn't optimal. But no, it's. I mean, Luke and I are also in the same flying club locally, and that's pretty similar. You go there 60% of the time flying, the rest of the time you're sort of talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the funny farm is a bit more flying involved. But I don't know, I quite like the community aspect as well, especially if you're sharing stuff, helping each other out.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason I like going to the club is because you get to talk to people, that kind of thing. It's otherwise, I can just go flying on my own somewhere. So
yeah, in the United States, I don't know what's like there, but in the United States, everything that's Horizon hobby tends to be like the king. That's like the coolest thing ever, and so that Draco is all they can talk about right now. So
it does look quite cool.
I got to agree. I'd be talking about it if I had one.
Well, it's a cool looking plane. Jeff, 7 Demo 7. He flew it and he made it, and then he gets in his car and he's like, I don't know, I'm not quite sold on it yet. I have to it didn't take with me instantly, so I had to give it a few more tries. So we'll report back if anything changes. But it's a cool plane. I mean, it has shock absorbers on it, and it looks like. I just kind of thinking it's kind of designed to be a pylon plane, so it's probably for really short dynamics. What he said was that as soon as you turn the power off, and it goes right down. So, and I'm anticipating that's the way that the plane is designed, because if you're flying pylons, you don't want a lot of lift. I would imagine you don't want to stay up in the
pylon plane. It's like a bush plane, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a pylon plane.
It's for short takeoffs, very short. Well, the original Draco was like extremely short takeoff and landing, wasn't it? And
yeah, have you seen the original Draco, Steve?
Yes.
You have, yeah, the one that it's modeling. Yeah, it's yeah.
Perfect.
Not a pylon plane.
No, pylon's going fast, isn't it? Between 2 or 3 points as fast as possible.
In fact, I venture to say it might even be about as far as you can get from a pylon plane.
So we're going to be talking about radios today with Darren, and so we're going to get into that in a while, but we're going to kind of go over what, and Darren's been on this kind of, I don't know, almost like a rant recently, where it's like anything will work with INAV as long as you want to hook it up. So we're going to
I'll get my DX6i out.
You get that working with the INAV, right? You can arm and disarm.
That's about it. You got 2 switches.
You could use a rudder switch or something if you're flying a wing, don't you?
Fantastic. But in the meantime, we've got, I think, kind of like the biggest news of the year. This is going to be it. And I don't know, it seems like INAV 3.0, I know we've been talking about it for quite a while, and a lot of people we've heard about it. It seems like it's hyped up a lot because it is so different from everything we've had before. And it's going to be the most, I think, important update we will have to INAV in the history of INAV. I don't know. I wasn't around for INAV 2.0 when we went from 1.9 to 2.0 or whatever. But with this one, we went from 2.6 to 3.0. We just switched, missed 2.7, 2.8, 2.9 altogether. So we're going to figuring out why this is so important, why we decided to go to 3.0, and kind of all the new features in it. And so here to help us break this down is Marc Hoffman. Marc, how are you doing today? As he gets a drink in his hands.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm doing well. As you said before, a little bit tired because I had a long night. Started to record a video for my channel today, and then I totally messed it because my phone went into overheat during the recording, and I didn't recognize. No, but all good. And yeah, we will have a lot of stuff to discuss about INAV 3.0, I think. And this is really a very big and important update for many people.
Okay, so fantastic. We're going to get into that right now, Marc. What is it? First of all, we should preference this by, maybe this isn't quite the first thing you want to do when you're done watching this is go put INAV 3.0, the release candidate 1, on all your planes.
Say again, please. I didn't quite got what you're asking me.
Okay, if this is after we're done watching this, maybe you shouldn't be putting this on all your planes. Maybe you should put this on a few planes that you were willing to test it out with, especially the first release candidate of this 3.0?
Yes, people can of course test it for themselves. That's actually no problem. The main things should work. So I've already heard from someone in the group that auto launch was fine. Plane was flying fine, but there could still be bugs. So there's people should be a little bit careful when they try it, and watch out for bugs and other things that could possibly happen, and of course report them on GitHub, not on Facebook. It's not really helpful. We can discuss it on Facebook in the group, but the bugs should be reported on GitHub.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up as far as bug reporting is concerned is, like, sometimes some of the people in the group are pretty new and they don't to this whole thing, and they maybe not another way around GitHub. If you're experienced at GitHub, then by all means go ahead. But in the past, what I've noticed that people will report bugs that have already been reported on. And so if you're going to report a bug, it's up to you to kind of go onto the GitHub page and see if someone else has reported that bug.
Yes, that can happen, of course. And if that happens, usually you should search for keywords you have. Like if you have a failure in waypoint mission mode, for example, you should search for waypoint and search for tickets that are already open during the last days or weeks.
Okay, perfect.
Usually during the last days, because INAV 3.0 release candidate was just published.
It is really quite easy to do that. Just if you go to GitHub, go to the INAV firmware. Well, if it bugs in firmware, do it on firmware. If it's in configurator, go to the configurator part of GitHub. But if you click on the issues button, there's a text box at the top, and it will have like open and a few little bits like that. So in there, you can just type the keyword you're looking for example, the waypoints. Press enter, and it will actually bring it up on screen. So it's not a difficult thing to do. It's quite simple.
If you're not as experienced with it too, you can also come to the group and kind of start talking about what the issue is, and if it's a serious bug, we will help. I'm getting an echo right now, Luke. There we go. Sorry about the thing. If there's a serious issue with it, then like we can pretty much help you to figure out how to phrase it, because sometimes people will write in and say stuff like, I tried INAV 3.0 and it flew funny, and like, you know exactly. we have nowhere to go with that, like, we need more specific. So, but the thing is, we come to the group and we can kind of like help you boil it down. Then we can figure out if it's a real issue, an issue you're having with your plane in particular, or if this is a general bug. But more importantly, we should get on to the point that there's some major changes in this release, and Marc's going to go over all of these things right now.
Yeah, I have a big list here with a lot of changes that I picked from the GitHub page, and I don't think that we can go over all of it. And we also discussed a few things in the past already, so we won't go too deep into details right now. But yeah, I've put it into sections. Darren also has the list, so he can follow up here if he wants. And let's talk about tuning stuff. I think that's most important, especially for beginners. So the whole tuning process of INAV was massively changed and simplified. A lot of people may know the guides I have we have on inavfixtuninggroup.com. And there are a few steps you have to do before you are completely done with the tuning, and a few of these steps are not even necessary anymore. Like the first thing INAV 3.0 has is a continuous servo trim, or what it will get. So you don't have to do auto trim anymore if you don't want to. You just enable the continuous servo trim, and this will permanently, automatically adjust the center point of the servos. So no trimming needed. Just enable it, go fly, and as soon as you release the sticks, the servos will automatically trim to the correct center point. That's a really important thing, because this reduces the number of battery packs you need to fly from maiden to final tune from 2 to 1, actually.
It's probably worth saying, though, you still want it flying nice in manual before doing this. That's really just sort of a fine-tuning.
Yeah, this isn't a replacement for manual, it's just a replacement for the auto trim and stuff.
Yes, that's the point. It's an auto trim replacement. So as soon as you enable this feature, this continuous servo trim, then the auto trim mode from the mode stub will disappear. It's like with launch mode. It's the same principle. And so you basically turn it on. You maiden your plane the first time just in acro mode as you would normally do. And the trim will be done just in flight, fully automatic. So you don't have to do anything else. And then after flying around, just cruising around on your maiden, you enable Autotune. And then the next big thing of INAV 3.0 comes, and that's the new Autotune system. The new Autotune has, I think, as far as I understand, Alex, is a slightly changed algorithm to calculate the feed forward. So that's more precise now and not fluctuating so much when you do your roll maneuvers or pitch maneuvers, looping loops, whatever. It also is now able to calculate the rates the plane can fly at. So no frame counting of your DVR or whatever is needed. You just fly around, the rates will be adjusted automatically. And that's a really cool thing, because this is one of the most done mistakes on INAV tuning, that people forget or ignore to set the rates before they tune, and that led to a lot of navigation flying issues, especially stalls and turns and all that stuff.
I mean, just to put that into perspective, I'm pretty sure we've seen 3 problems this week that are all down to rates. That's just 1 week, so this is a really big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Okay, I really just ask you about the manual trim, actually the continuous trim. So what this means is that if you're putting a different battery pack in, or if you're flying on a different kind of day where you maybe have more wind, or if you have whatever else, the plane will adjust for you.
Well, none of those things should really affect your trim anyway, because if you put the battery in the same place to get the same CG, then it should remain mostly the same.
Yes, but if you have a CG change,
wind, but yeah, it will account for inaccuracies a bit. And another good example is like an Easy Star. When you take the tail off to put it back in the box, you have to disconnect the elevator linkage. So now, when you put it back together, and it'll trim correctly again, only small inaccuracies. And maybe things like if you want to fly really fast one day and slow another day, it'll help with things like that. So in manual mode.
Yeah, exactly. So in menu, while you are flying in manual mode, of course, the trim will not adjust, because then INAV cannot tell if you are, how can I say?
Sorry, yeah, I meant in acro mode, not manual mode. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. This is only active during.
You're not active anymore.
So.
Sharon's turning red right now. It's really fun.
So sorry when I'm still stumbling a little bit. I'm watching the audio meters right now because I had to change some more stuff because it was changing all the time. I hope it's done now. Yeah, so in manual mode, as I said, it won't work, because what the auto trim feature is doing, it watches the I term of the PIFF controller if it is active while there is no stick input, and this I-term deviation is translated into servo trim, servo center movement, and this is how the auto trim effectively works.
This is going to be huge. I mean, this is going to make, that alone is just probably worthy of making this INAV 3.0, but that's just a little part of what's going on here. But I mean, it is huge because it's most of the issues, as Darren was pointing out. We get a lot of issues of people with the rates and the trims being wrong. So these are huge changes right here.
Definitely. I mean, there are often people saying, yeah, for autopilot, for example, you just launch, you fly, you do a short auto-tune and it's done. And basically, it's now the same for INAV. So you launch on your maiden, you do your auto-tune, and it's done. Because autopilot, for example, is doing this in-flight servo trim for a long time now. There's a reason why there is no trimming feature on autopilot. Okay, what else? Let me get my list here. Yes, PID FF controller. We have a D term now with INAV 3.0. This D term is not used by default. It will stay on 0 even after autotune. It will not change. The D term is only for manual adjustment, for manual tuning right now, because we don't know yet what the right balance between P and D will be to fit on many planes. So we decided to not change it automatically right now, maybe with INAV 3.1 later. But for now, D term is not used by default, but can be used to ramp up your P value and get more stable flights, especially if you have very fast servos. Then this can be helpful to counteract wind and turbulences.
So if it's going to be manual, are we going to come out with some kind of guide that tells people, like, if you have a small plane and you have faster digital servos, you should change your D to this? And then if you have a plane that's over metered, let's say, and you have the standard analog servos, your D term should be something like this.
Sorry, I was a little bit distracted right now.
All right, you're watching the levels again. Okay.
No, I'm watching the chat in parallel because Grumpy Old Nerd asked, that feature seems super interesting, but I fear it will hide mechanical fuck-ups. Yes, of course, it can hide. Luke, by the way, I have echo. It can hide mechanical issues with your plane, but if you don't fly in manual mode currently with INAV 2.6 or older, you also hide mechanical issues because you have an integer term that constantly keeps your plane flying straight. The only difference is that this permanent automatic trim of your plane is now also affecting the manual mode. That was not the case before. But there are not too much people flying in manual mode all the time. So I think it won't make a big difference. And as I said before, it's optional. You can, the feature is off by default, and you have to enable it specifically.
It is also true. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there's also limits to how far it will adjust the trim. So I believe Alex said it's between 1,300 and 1,700. Yeah. So you've still got some play if something does go wrong. And if you land your plane, you will clearly see that if the control surfaces are deviated a lot, that something is wrong with your plane.
What I was asking was about the D term. As far as you said that you can only adjust it manually. So will we be coming out with some kind of like little cheat sheets as far as, or guides to help people know if you have a digital servos on a plane that's less than a meter, that's a speed plane, you might be able to change your D term to this and get away with it, or we're not going to touch that up whatsoever until 3.1 or 3.1.
Yeah, basically the D term, in theory, it should be the same like on quads. You have a specific P and D balance value because what the D term is doing, it's setting a brake or a smoothness to the P value, and you have to have the right balance based on the inertia on the specific axis on the plane. And maybe we can have some kind of cheat sheet to say, hey, a 2-to-1 balance or a 3-to-4 balance or whatever is fine for this type of plane. And then people can adjust them up and down simultaneously, just keep the ratio the same to make it more locked in or a more loose tune at the end. It should be the same as on quads after all.
Okay, cool.
Okay, what else? And one small thing for tuning is maybe not even a lot of people will have recognized before. If you fly INAV with a T-tail plane or V-tail plane, whatever has a rudder in the back, you can have weird issues if you do bank and yank turns. So just banking, turning around, and then leveling out again in acro mode. Because then what INAV tries to do, or tried to do before, is the integral value on your rudder tries to push back the nose into the direction where it was before, and that can happen, or that can lead to strange flight behavior. This was finally also fixed in 3.0 and is now handled by the flight controller. So you don't get that yaw lock anymore, and you can normally fly like in manual mode, and you don't have to dial down the I term on yaw to 0 anymore.
Okay, that's awesome. So basically, one of the questions somebody had a while back was, and actually this came up in the group, somebody was asking, old-time pilots what they'll do is they'll put a little bit of rudder turn into, so that when they bank left or right, the rudder will also work in coordination with it. This is going back, a lot of the transmitters have this feature. They want to know how you do this in INAV, and we don't do this in INAV, right?
Nah, yes and no. If you are in a navigation mode and you have turn assist active, then of course turn assist will mix yaw into the turn, but it's not that easy that you can just mix roll and yaw together, because if you go into a turn, you just one time enable roll to go into the bank angle, and then you level out your or you center your roll stick again to stay in that orientation, and just make small adjustments during the turn to stay in that bank angle. So you need yaw independent from your roll axis at the end.
Okay, but there's some of the larger planes where you need to have the yaw turned on. You can still do that manually, I guess, as long as you're flying. Even in stabilized modes, you can kind of still use, if you want to, just basically what happens is, this was kind of a lazy way to do things. So you would, some of the larger planes, I should back up and say this, some of the really large planes, the ones that are 2 meters long with the V-tail, with the, not V-tails, but standard tails, if you do not put a little bit of rudder into it, what it ends up kind of happening is the plane doesn't quite fly right. It always feels like the tail's being dragged around by the plane. So you have to learn how to put a little bit of rudder into it. And I guess to this day, you still have to do that with INAV.
No, that's the point. This is exactly what is fixed now, because now the integral value is disabled as soon as you bank the plane. Even in acro mode, it does differentiate between a bank position or level position, and it will disable the I term on yaw if you bank, so you can make your turns as you want, and then you just level out by yourself, and then the yaw is the rudder is centered again.
Perfect. Okay. Good to know.
So basically stepping on the ball in a full-size plane. That's what you were talking about there, Steve. So it's just adding a bit of rudder just to keep the CG and the balance of everything right in the plane. I mean, Luke will know better because he flies real planes.
Yeah, step on the ball to keep everything coordinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're guys like myself who pretty much came out of the flying wings to fly regular T-tail planes. Especially when you get these larger ones, you're not really used to that. So you notice that, yeah, I can bank left or right, but the larger planes always kind of feels like the tail's being dragged around. And so then you really have to start learning how to mix in rudder with that. It's on the same stick as your throttle, so the left stick, and you kind of have to, you get much better turns that way. So.
All right. Andy in the chat has asked, with the new servo trim feature, is it recommended to still check and adjust the servo centers in configurator and adjust the linkages if they're outside of the 500 either side of central? So basically, if you've done...
You mean 50?
Yeah, 50. The excessive amount of trim needed to keep it flying straight. And I would say, yes, you still don't want to have lots and lots of trim If you ideally want it 1550 to 1450 within that range.
Yes, exactly. So what you want to do is you fly your first flight, a little bit cruising around, and after your auto tune or whatever you did during your first flight, you can land. The trims are still automatically saved after disarm, so you can basically check after every flight. You disarm, you check your servo trims, and you will see if anything is wrong. And if it's more than 1550 or 1450, as Darren said, then it's better to trim mechanically, because this also helps on the next flight on your launch. Like if your elevator or your elevons need some more reflex and are trimmed down too much, this will also help on easier launches if you have centered them at the beginning of the flight. But yes, the trim is basically as before, as far as I know, saved after every flight as soon as you disarm.
Yeah, and this is kind of huge if you really want your plane to fly better. I know there's a lot of guys who we say you should do a manual tune, and that assumes you know how to fly a plane manually. And there's a lot of guys who just are afraid to try that out, especially if coming over from quads. You want something that's stabilized, whatever else. This is a way around it. If you want to get your plane flying even better, go back and change. Make sure your control surfaces are between 1450 and 1550.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our next new feature, before I go into that, I want to ask the chat, please make some wave emoji or whatever if you have ever if you ever wanted to fly a waypoint mission and you forgot to load the waypoint mission from your EEPROM into your flight controller before you launch. Then I want to see an emoji in the chat right now, because I bet a lot of people have done this before. For now, I switch to the next one.
Oh, when you're doing that emoji, don't forget to like the video.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So two new things for Return to Home that are really, really interesting, especially for fixed wing pilots. It's now possible to override the climb first and the climb first, and how's the other option called? I forgot it right now. Especially the climb first option. Like, let's say you are flying away from you, you want to turn around and fly home, you enable your return to home switch, you're flying at 50 meters, but your return to home altitude is, let's say, 200 meters, and you want to avoid unnecessary climbs of the plane before it turns around to come back. Now it's possible to abort the climb by pushing the pitch stick forward during the climb phase, and then the plane will just level out, turn around, and come back at the altitude as it is right now. And you can also override the climb first option if you push your roll stick to the right or to the left for 2 seconds, and then the plane will abort the climb first and make a turn back while climbing. So you can influence that right now. This is especially important for people flying in mountains, or if you have set your return to home altitude to max, that means the maximum flight altitude during your current flight, just to avoid unnecessary climbs and draining your battery if you want to use return to home at the end of your flight. So this is a really cool feature to have that option to override that.
But that's only for if you enable return to home, right?
Yes, this is only if you enable return to home via switch, because of course if you have a fail-safe situation, then the return to home will be executed as it's set up. You cannot override it. And a new option for the climb phase is now also available. For now we just have climb first or turn around first. So that means if you have climb first and you are flying away from you, then the plane will first keep its course, climb to the desired return to home altitude, and then turn around. Or you have climb first off, then it will turn around directly and climb during the way home. The new feature is now a spiral climb option. that means the plane will switch into position hold when you hit the return to home switch, and then during the spiral it will climb to the desired return to home altitude and then come back to you. This is also very important for people flying between mountains or other high obstacles, just to avoid to hit anything and have a direct climb on spot, similar like a quadcopter would do that.
Okay, that sounds good. Luke's shaking his head. So, Luke, you have something to add to that?
Oh, I wasn't shaking my head. That was all perfect.
No, I mean, you're like in agreement with that.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is best as far as doing a spiral climb? What's most efficient, spiral or just going a straight out climb?
I guess the most efficient is turn back and then climb, but I'll probably be going for a spiral climb, not for mountain, since unfortunately England isn't particularly mountainous, but certainly when around trees and that kind of thing can be very useful.
Perfect.
Yeah, the thing I like most is the option that you now have to choose whichever one you set. I mean, personally, I choose climb first because where we fly, there's trees either side. So if I do turn first, I'm gonna hit a tree. If I'm flying low.
Yeah, exactly. If you know exactly where you're likely to be flying, then you can choose something else. So.
Exactly. So I mean, the return to home settings to me have always been depending on your flying area, what suits you best. I mean, as you say, turn first, climb on the way back is the most efficient. But now we have a lot of options. We have the spiral climb if you're potentially in tight areas like mountainous areas, but also if we're climbing first and we're safe, we can move the stick and it will turn around and climb on the way back. So yeah, it's really, really nice system now.
Can you control the climb radius of the spiral turns?
Well, that'll be set by the position
loiter
hold.
radius. Yes, that's the loiter position hold, loiter radius. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So, and now we can come back to the first thing, why I asked in the chat about loading waypoint missions from the EEPROM. INAV will now have the option to automatically load a stored EEPROM mission. You can turn that on. Right now, I think it's in the only in the CAI to enable it. I'm not sure if it will come into the configurator too. But yes, that allows you to save a waypoint to the EEPROM, to the onboard flash memory, where it doesn't get lost. And as soon as you power up INAV, the mission will automatically be loaded. And this will also be notified on the arming screen. So as soon as you arm your plane, it will tell you in the arming screen that a waypoint mission is currently loaded, so you can't forget anymore, hopefully, when you want to fly a mission.
Interesting.
What else? So
actually, before you go off that, is there a possibility at some point where you can have like a God, I think you guys are all too young to remember this, but back in the early days of DOS, all the programs were too hard to remember how to go to C / the word perfect, then you type wp.exe to start the program. So what would happen is when you boot up your computer, there would be a window. It wasn't Windows, but just a window, a little screen, and it said, if you want to start WordPerfect, press A. If you want to start Lotus 1, 2, 3, press B, or whatever else. Would there be something like that for missions where you can save like 1 to 5 different missions that you normally fly? So when you fire up INAV,
no, not yet. There are requests about storing multiple missions on the flight controller or on the SD card in the flight controller, because the flight controller won't have enough flash memory to store multiple missions on it. But yeah, maybe sometime in the future, but not right now. But there are plans to have waypoint missions stored on the SD card. So you can make multiple mission profiles and then select over the OSD menu, for example. That's requested, and hopefully we will see that soon.
Love it.
I feel like Darren brought it up in the chat. I feel like we have to mention it. I feel really bad talking about it, but Adam stepping on his transmitter with the launch of the Drac was quite a funny one. I really did quite like that video.
Yeah,
But there has been something requested in INAV that will hopefully stop that.
Oh, really? What is it?
Yeah, well, basically, I think half of Adam's problems there was with auto launch at the moment. He's obviously using idle, and he had to kick the throttle on the transmitter to get it to idle.
Oh, I see. So it kind of has to be within foot distance kind of thing to do it.
Yeah, so your transmitter has to be really close. He's got, bad conditions. He's throwing in a direction he doesn't want to throw in. It's all building up in your head, isn't it? So I can't remember if it's actually been merged or not. If it has, it's very recent. But the concept is there to have a delayed idle. So you enable auto launch, set your idle, and then there'll be a timeout. I think 10 seconds was the suggestion, but it could be customizable. And it'll actually do like a beep countdown to let you know when it's going to kick in the idle.
Yeah, and it's still debated. Yeah, it's still in the debate. It's not decided yet, and also not merged how it will work. But there are different approaches. Some say ESC beeper, but that would be no option if we have a standard ESC. Some say buzzer, but we also have planes with no buzzer, especially if you have a big orange big drag. You don't want to add you don't need to add a buzzer.
You wouldn't hear it over the motor.
You can find that plane.
So there were also suggestions to do it like autopilot, as autopilot has aileron shake, so it makes a countdown by moving the ailerons up and down.
I think that's a good way to do
it. At the end, it will do it really quickly, and to confirm the motor launch, you have to wag the tail of the plane. That's a bit weird, especially on data rings, but it seems to work. Maybe this will come in the future too. But actually, Adam could have completely avoided it if he had read my auto launch guide, because there is something like auto launch min time. You can set up a time frame where you cannot abort auto launch unless you lower the throttle to 0 with stick input.
He still would have kicked his transmitter.
Yeah, but he would have kicked it, but the auto launch wouldn't have been aborted, and that wouldn't have cost him 1,500 pounds.
No, Adam does know about that setting, but he didn't want to use it because he always likes the option of cancelling the auto launch if he needs to.
Ah, okay.
But no, it didn't cost him that. His
okay. The whole plane was that. I know not everything was destroyed, of course. Yeah, so
I think we should start a GoFundMe page and get enough money so we can buy Adam a tray for his transmitter.
Okay, so what next? That's a really cool feature here. I think Darren also wasn't it even you who programmed it? The pan servo home direction offset?
No, it wasn't me. I can't remember who it was now, but yeah, that's awesome. That's a really nice feature.
That's so cool. So what it actually does is, if you have your FPV view and you have a pan and tilt servo on it, or at least a pan servo where you can look around. Before, the home arrow was always pointing into the direction relative to the plane's heading, or the plane's bearing, not heading. And what this new feature does, it turns the home arrow relative to your camera view angle. So like if your home is directly behind the plane and you look to the left, the home arrow will turn from downward facing to the left, because the home point then is on the left side of you if you turn the camera. That's a really cool feature.
Cool.
I have seen a post or a comment on Facebook just today, I think, where someone asked how that works with the or how he can set that up with the 360 degrees infinity pan, but unfortunately in this case it won't work because INAV cannot know in what position the pan servo is right now if you have a endless pan and tilt, because that's possible with a slip ring, for example, but INAV cannot know where the camera is looking right now.
How do you set up the offset and the scale of the servo so that it knows how many degrees it can rotate and that kind of thing. I presume there's a simple way to do it.
Yeah, it's over CI variables. I think, Darren, you were in this discussion on GitHub. Maybe you know more about that, how it's done, than I do.
Oh, no, I haven't read anything.
No, I mean Darren.
It was a little while ago, but yeah, I think there. I can't actually remember, to be honest. But yeah, but it's just a couple of CLI variables. But yeah, it was quite simple to set up.
I'll give it a bit more of a look then.
Yeah,
but as far as I know, it's basically just three things you have to tell INAV what channel what output channel the pen servo is on, and how much degree max you will have in each direction. But I can't say for sure right now. I have to look it up too.
Perfect.
So I can send you the GitHub ticket number if you want to have a look. It's 6501. Okay, what else? Yeah, safe homes. Safe homes was a new feature that was introduced with INAV 2.6, where you can have home points for the plane to come back to that are not directly above you. Like if you have a mountain or hill or high trees behind you, for example, you can set a safe home point a little bit further away from you. So this will be considered as a home point if you are near or in a 200-meter radius. This 200 meters can now be adjusted down and up to 650 meters maximum. That's also new in 3.0, because before it was hard-coded. So what else? By the way, Luke, just interrupt me if there are some questions in the chat, right?
I will do. Yep, will do. Okay,
great. Our C-Link updates. We have some updates for Crossfire users. The RSSI value and the signal to noise ratio value displays have changed a little bit to be more compact and more clear. Then Crossfire users will get the option to report cell voltage instead of battery voltage to the radio. That's really important if you use different battery cell counts all the time between your crafts, and just to have the cell voltage as a consistent number, and also helpful for some of the telemetry widgets, especially if you always use the same OpenTX model, for example, and you use the telemetry widgets. Having the cell voltage instead of the whole battery voltage, this helps to set up the alarms on the widget, because otherwise you have to set the alarm every time new if you have a 2S, 3S, 4S, 6S or whatever battery, and this is not needed anymore if you can report the cell voltage. Any questions about that right now? No. Okay, what else? Some of the people who are familiar with Autopilot will like that one. Mavlink and Mavlink 2 RC-Link is now supported. So what you can do, you can connect an Mavlink compatible ground control station like Q ground control to INAV, not only to get telemetry down, but also to send RC signals up to the craft. So you can, for example, use Q ground control in an extreme case with a gamepad, for example, on your PC, and fly your plane with a gamepad over your PC and telemetry long range link. This is a really cool thing, and I think some people, especially for extreme long range stuff, might like to use that.
Yeah, I think the most useful thing is if you want to fly fully over 4G or something like that, which I don't think is too popular with INAV, mostly just because you can't at the moment, but hopefully it will allow for some things in the future.
Yeah, so as the RC-Link support works now, you can even arm your plane via your PC and Q ground control, because you just have to change the corresponding channel for that. So in theory, you can completely fly the plane over Mavlink. And that was not possible before.
On your house then, right? For
example,
40, 50 meters up, and then you would Yeah, you can get thousands and thousands of kilometers of distance with your plane.
Okay, what else? And one last important thing for Ghost, Immersion RC Ghost users is GPS telemetry is now supported by INAV through Ghost, but Ghost also needs to get the corresponding update that's not ready yet. There's a beta available, but I think it's not public. So especially long-range pilots or quad pilots, long-range quad pilots will get their GPS data on their radio with the Ghost system.
While we're in the RC Link section, there's one thing that you've not got on here that I've checked it in the other section it might be in, but it's not there, so I wouldn't mind covering it, which is particularly important for people who use RC Links that don't have a failsafe bit. So some 433 megahertz systems, that sort of thing, is that pre-arm is now in the modes. So I've seen a lot of people, well, not a lot, but I've seen comments from people that have things like OpenLRS, who, if they have a failsafe, it automatically puts the arm switch in the arm position.
That's ExpressLRS, right?
ExpressLRS.
Not. Oh, were you on ExpressLRS? Because there's OpenLRS.
OpenHD.
No, it is OpenLRS. It's the old 433 megahertz.
That was another different one you mentioned there. OpenHD is another completely separate thing, and that's for
video. and controlling, actually.
Yeah.
And controlling. Yeah, good point.
But yeah, no, OpenLRS. I'm sure it was Open. You could run it on the orange receivers and transmit.
Yeah, that's OpenLRS. Yeah.
Okay.
But it has no failsafe bit. So when you set failsafe, you do it with stick positions. So one of these stick positions is putting it in the arm position, obviously. So you want it armed. But if you're on the ground or something like that, you accidentally turn on the transmitter, it will, and you've already disarmed, it will prevent it from rearming and activating failsafe if you're in a position where you don't want it to. So it's quite useful for those people.
And there are still people using the orange receivers.
Oh my God.
I've got one somewhere.
These aren't the DSMX or DSM2 orange receivers. These are Orange did a line of LRS receivers, long range receivers. 433 stuff.
Okay, so no questions at this point from the chat. No. OSD updates. We are not even half through. Damn, that's a long list.
Actually, having said that, I have orange receivers on loads of stuff because they're the DSM2 ones, just because they're great for short range park fly stuff. So cheap and light.
Sounds good. Okay, so OSD updates. For Pixel OSD, you can now select different speed sources for the speed value. Right now it was only ground speed by default, and you could not change that, but now you can set up your airspeed and your 3D speed for the scroll sidebar item. Then you are also able to change the OSD sidebar height on INAV 3.0 to adjust it independent from the crosshair. That's also helpful. And you can also disable the sidebar but keeping the center markers on the side. That's also helpful if you don't want to have the sidebars but want to have a orientation point for your artificial horizon, especially if you have disabled the crosshair, because then you still know when your horizon is actually level right now. Another big update on the OSD is the stats page. Because now you don't have just one stats page, you will have multiple ones with a lot more information about your flight at the end, and you can scroll through them after disarming with your roll input stick. And you can change your failsafe procedure from the OSD menu now. That means you can switch between drop and return to home as a failsafe mode, but that's most important for quad pilots who fly sometimes with with a GPS-enabled quads in bandos or in buildings or whatever, because you don't want to have return to home enabled if you fly in a big factory hall, of course. Okay, so any question at this point? No.
There are also a few hacks for DJI OSD that have been added.
Oh, that's a really good point. By the way, I just got a picture from someone in the group today. I will put it here into Skype first and then also share it with the stream. So there is still a configurator. There's still a configurator update planned for 3.0, so it should. It's not merged yet, but you will get a whole new section for DJI HD FPV systems with all the settings here, like what speed source you want to have, disable unsupported items, so you actually see what items are available on your DJI OSD in the list on the left side. And yeah, a few more settings like the adjustments over the craft name and all that stuff. So yeah, you will get your DJI HD settings in the configurator, and that should become available before the final release of the configurator. Okay. What next? This is done. This is done. Okay. Yeah, some internal changes. A new filter type for the gyro and removal of old deprecated filters that are not very helpful anymore. I don't understand much of that, so that's Pavel's special force to handle INAV and sensor filtering. And the max cell count INAV can detect is now raised to 12. I think it was 8 before the limit. I'm not sure right now if it was 6 cells or 8 cell LiPo. Now the maximum cell count is 12 that can be auto-detected. And as some of you may have seen the video from me recently about the OSD configuration, and yeah, I mentioned that the naming of the OSD settings was homogenized to be more even and easier to find. This is also part of INAV 3.0, and I hope this is complete as soon as the final release. What else? So a few changes we have in the modes. So the classic cruise mode we had before until 2.6 is now called course hold. In the OSD it will be shown as CRSH. Yes, it sounds like crash. Maybe not the best idea to name it like that, but
I think a lot of people have crash mode in INAV.
Yeah, I think so.
Finding the closest body of water.
Yes. And there will be an extra cruise mode right now that automatically combines course hold and altitude hold. So in theory, it is the same if you enable the new course hold and altitude hold at the same time, or if you just use cruise mode. This is mainly to make it easier for beginners to understand. If you want to have a cruise mode, you want to cruise, you want to keep your altitude, you just have to enable a single mode now and don't have to enable both at the same time.
Yeah, so course hold is the old cruise mode, cruise is the old 3D cruise.
Yes, exactly. Then, thanks to Darren, we have now an increased number of mode ranges. Maybe you can say something about that?
Well, this was really, it came about from something Josh and I were sort of messing about with, trying to get as many different switches onto a single channel as possible. Because we have things like Crossfire that only have 12 channels. So we're actually merging sort of 3 switches onto a single RC channel, but all working independently. The problem with that is you need a lot more RC ranges to actually configure it in INAV. And it was looking like it could run out. But at the end of the day, this is just a number, as Pavel likes to say. So it was easy enough to increase that number.
Yeah, unless you do it with the adjustments, for example, and then suddenly the configurator crashes if you want to change settings.
That's logical switches.
Logical switches, that was it, yeah.
Switches.
but I think with the adjustments, we had a similar issue when we tried to enable up to 40. I think then also you couldn't access it with the configurator anymore.
Right, yeah. I mean, logical switches was the same. I think I could get that safely to 30. What's it now? 32. So I could get another 16, I think, and it was fine. But if I tried to double it to 64, logical switches wouldn't work anymore, neither would modes. So that's why that's not gone in.
I like the idea of Snuggles FPV. We need CRSH t-shirts. INAV CRSH mode.
Yeah, I agree. That'll be good.
CRSH with INAV.
Okay, so yeah, we are nearly done with the list here. For peripherals, just a few smaller things. D-Shot beeper is now finally supported, especially for quad users, but maybe also for some plane users. So you can make your motor beep by switch if you don't have installed a buzzer. The Bosch BMI 088 IMU is now also supported with a new driver that might be used in future flight controller releases, and it should be a very high quality IMU as far as I know, and it could be used, for example, for dual IMU flight controllers in the future. So that's more a future-proof improvement at this point. And one important note, especially for people buying or building planes with high-end hardware or with expensive servos, you know who I'm talking about.
We're talking about
Henrik will like that. Now it's possible to use standard PWM and ESPAS servos at the same time. So before you had to decide if you use all servos on ESPAS or all servos on PWM. And with INAV 3.0, you can mix them up together. So you can still have some cheap servos for your pan and tilt system directly controlled by the flight controller, and then your main control surface servos, expensive or high quality ESPAS servos, to have them all on one connector on the flight controller. Yeah, some changes in the INAV programming feature, like you can now set the GPS status as a programming trigger for some functions you want to have. You can set the heading of the plane or of the copter, whatever, as a logic condition. So you can set a specific flying direction on a switch, for example, or you can trigger a point of interest on, or let's say you can say you can program like a fence function that the plane or the copter should automatically turn around into your direction if you go too far, whatever your fantasy brings up. And you can also allow logic conditions to override RC channels. I did not come up with an own idea what you could do with that, but maybe you can also switch into a specific mode if you are too far away or too high, whatever, and you can build your own fence, your own geofence function. And one important thing we really need to figure out is the user programmable PID controller or PIDFF controller that should allow us to build real VTOLs with a complete VTOL transition system. Of course, it's a lot of work. It needs programming by the user. It's not built into INAV like on AutoPlane with a preset, but it should be possible at this point. And yeah, two last things, especially for multi-rotor users with INAV. you can now set your camera up tilt as an artificial horizon compensation. So you can say you want to have the artificial horizon centered if your camera is centered to the horizon instead of the craft centered to the horizon. Some people like that because they want to have the camera as their reference point and not the quad or multi-rotor frame. And the last thing I have on my list here is the ability to not slow down your multi-rotor when you approach a waypoint. So a complete waypoint mission will be much more smooth and consistent instead of stopping, turning, and then going again. So this is also something requested for a long time on INAV.
I've not looked at the camera up tilt, but does that work both ways? I'm just thinking, if you've got a model where the foam is pointing the camera up and down or down slightly, could the camera then be adjused so the AHI is central?
For wings, you already have the horizon offset, so you can offset the crosshair and the artificial horizon by up to 2 rows up or down based on your camera angle. But the horizon will still be centered on your crosshair when the plane is level. But on the multi-rotor, if you want to fly forward, you have to tilt the multi-rotor.
Yeah, of course. And obviously yaw and roll and all that have different effects then, yeah.
Yes, so, and this is what this is targeted at. So if your multi-rotor is leveled and the camera is looking upwards, then the artificial horizon will actually be below the camera. And if you tilt your craft to look forward or to fly forward, then the horizon will be on the crosshair. So you basically have a fixed reference point for your tilt angle to have a specific speed for your multi-rotor at this point. For cruising speed, for example. That's what it's meant to do at this point. I think it's a little bit weird. I would not use it, I think. I only have some Betaflight quads, and I usually don't use Horizon anyway on them. But yeah, some people seem to like it, so this was one addition on 3.0.
So I've got some questions for you, Marc.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are for the people who are brand new to INAV 3.0, who are installing this on their plane. What are the steps required? So if you have a plane that's already tuned in, let's say, INAV 2.6, and you want to bring it over to 3.0, what do you need to do? And B, what do you need to do if this is a brand new plane, you're starting from scratch?
Yeah, so for that, I would say I will quickly share my screen at this point. Just give me a second. Okay, first of all, I share my screen in Skype. This one, and then we switch here to screen. Okay, so first of all, if you want to update from 2.6 to 3.0, do not transfer your tune of your airplane unless you are 100% sure and completely certain that this tune is working absolutely perfect and you cannot get it better. The tune will work on 3.0, but trust me, the new Autotune, the new Autotrim will make a better tune than, I would say, 90% of the planes out there. I'm pretty certain on that. So what you actually do, you can take a diff all from your INAV 2.6 or 2.5 plane. I'm not sure about 2.5 right now. There was something that also has changed here. You go into the diff file like this. Let me make it a little bit bigger. And then it's important to remove the whole profile section here. That's your complete tuning with rates, with pits, whatever on the tune has changed. You completely remove that, and then you can load back your diff into INAV 3.0. So you have all the other settings like channel ranges, mode ranges, your mixer, everything transferred to 3.0. That's fine, but not the tune. And then you can go into the configurator, you connect the configurator, and you go into presets, And at this point, you just apply the plane with a tail or plane without tail. So plane without tail would be the any data wing, AR wing, whatever. And with a tail, everything that has a separate elevator. Just apply the preset and then just do an auto-tune from that point. And that's basically all you need to do. And during the next flight, you do an auto-tune and you are good to go.
Okay, looks good.
Okay, so while we've got a quiet bit, Andy in the chat has asked, does 3.0 need any changes to the OpenTX model? Yes and no. It will work absolutely fine. The voice pack will obviously be wrong because it's set for cruise mode. Actually, I need to check the mode. The mode has changed. But
the modes will work. The modes will work. The adjustments won't work. The adjustments IDs have changed.
Yeah, that's the pro model, isn't it? I'm just
for the pro model,
standard model. So I'm not sure the mode ID is the same for cruise. If it is, it should work, but I will double check and I'll put a note in the Facebook group.
No, if you have used the cruise plus altitude hold on 2.6, this will automatically switch to course hold and altitude hold. So it will still use this variant of cruise mode at this point, because I have transferred my 2.6 setup to 3.0 on the Dart 250G here. And yeah, let me have a look. Let me screen host. There we go. And here you can see it's on nav course hold and nav alt hold enabled automatically.
Cool.
Yeah, cruise mode is for some reason somewhere down here. Wait a second, where's cruise?
You've gone past it. It's
here, yeah, exactly. So basically, I can now set this to cruise, set it to this range, and then I can remove this one, and it will do exactly the same.
Yeah.
So yeah. By the way, down here is the auto level. The new auto level feature. Did I mention that before?
You said you have to enable it.
No, actually, it was mentioned in the chat or asking about it, but we didn't actually talk about it.
I forgot that. Yeah. Okay.
That was on other episodes, though.
No, we don't end that episode with that cliffhanger. Yeah, the new auto level feature. That's one of the tuning features. For some reason, I forgot it in my list. Right now you can find it down here. It will move upwards, I think, to the auto trim and auto tune. And what the auto level feature is doing, up to look, I have echo. Up to INAV 2.6, no, still echo. Up to INAV 2.6, you had to use the board pitch alignment to adjust your pitch angle during cruise flight to keep altitude even in angle mode, for example, and not dive or climb. This will change with INAV 3.0. And in the configuration tab, you will see that the pitch and roll alignment is gone here. It's only available in the CAI right now. And what you can do now is in advanced tuning, in pit tuning, sorry. It takes a moment to load. In pit tuning under mechanics, you will have a new line now with the board pitch, no, not pitch alignment. Let me check quickly. Mechanics, fixed ring level trim, that's how it's called. And now you can set a trim value for level flight here, and it can be adjusted to plus 10 degrees and minus 10 degrees if you need. And this can also be completely automatically tuned. As we don't need auto trim anymore, in theory, you can, instead of auto trim, use the fixed ring level trim, the auto level mode, instead of auto trim. So yeah, that's mainly the new thing. Okay, where did we stop before that?
We were talking about the group models. So
yeah, right.
Long story short, the Pro model won't work with the adjustments, but everything else should be fine.
Yeah.
Right, Colby has just mentioned about will there be an update for the setup guide, because of obviously what we've been seeing in the group. So the current setup guide, I actually went through, I think it was yesterday. I spent a good couple of hours going through it, and it's fine at the moment. It's not set up for free, but it's more a configurator guide. So it's more going through configurator, explaining what those parts do. So configurator has actually changed a fair bit. So probably we'll update this guide based on INAV 3, because that was based on INAV 2.0, I believe. It's quite old.
Right.
So we can update that, and obviously we will update other guides with what to do with INAV 3.0. So yeah, we will be updating the site. It probably won't happen immediately, but it will be happening in the future.
Okay, guys, do we want to make a quick break and then continue, and then we can soon switch to our radio topic, I think.
Okay.
Unless there are more questions.
What I think we could do is we could probably go into the radio topic, and then we'll end the show with questions people might have that we'll pick up at the very end that we haven't covered. So that way Luke can have a chance to look them all over, and then it will get back to us, report at the very end. But the radio topic is really big, and I think needs some time to address. So let's take a 3-minute break so we can get coffee, use the restroom, and let's get back to it.
Okay, see you in a minute.
3.0. Wow.
Okay, and we are back.
Hey, we're back, everybody. Thank you very much. Marc, that was really fantastic overview of everything. Anything you might have forgotten to mention?
Not at the moment. We found out that I missed the auto level, one of the most important features. But yeah, I think we have covered mostly. I think there are many more things. We have about 200 tickets and pull requests on the 3.0 milestone on GitHub, so we can't go over everything. And a lot of stuff is small under the hood changes, so it's not interesting at all. But I think this list I presented now during the last 60-70 minutes is already long enough.
Okay. Have we had any major bugs reported in the first day that you saw on GitHub?
Not yet, as far as I know. I've looked about 2 or 3 hours ago, and I didn't see anything major right now, but I think the release was just yesterday evening, so I don't think that many people will have flown it yet. And it was intensively tested, so we have so many new features. Alex has basically run down his keyboard with all the features he implemented. And yeah, he also tested everything he did. I also did some test flights with 3 different planes, and I think there shouldn't be anything major right now. Maybe during the next weeks we will see some minor glitches, like mode transitions or whatever, some very special things, but the main features flying should all be stable.
Okay, one thing I want to mention before we get into transmitters is that when INAV 3.0, the final release candidate, actually the stable version gets released, what we like to do in the group is have a kind of a fundraiser to say, like, if you've donated to the developers, it's your opportunity to mention we'll start a post and say, like, I kicked in some money for them, because this is a lot of people burned a lot of hours for this. This is huge, and it's aimed towards us in particular. So we really need to give them a tip. Like, good service at a restaurant, you want to tip them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are always we have Pavel's Patreon and donation function over PayPal, and I think Alex has also something like that. I mean, he really earns a lot of credits this time, so he has Alex has done so much. I mean, I think
pretty much Mr. INAV 3.0, isn't he?
Yeah, really. I mean, I looked through all the GitHub tickets. I have a full screen list here, and I think his name was appearing in every second of them. That's just crazy.
Fantastic.
All right, Peter's just asked, when is the official launch of INAV 3.0? The developers probably don't even know yet. It's just going to go through a couple of release candidate stages, and when they're satisfied that everything's okay, they've got as much out of it as they want to, it will be released. So probably June, but no one knows a date yet.
I think what might happen, or when I look at the past INAV releases, usually the developers want to wait 2 to 3 weeks after a release candidate was published, if there are any major issues reported. So it could happen if we are lucky that the release candidate 1 works already perfectly. But I think there are 1-2 small things that might be merged in the next 1 or 2 weeks. That's not sure. That's not safe yet. But if there are no major issues during the next 3 weeks, then maybe we will have a release beginning to mid of June, I think. If there are bugs, then it might take a little longer, because then another release candidate comes out, and then they will wait another 2 weeks from there if something major is found.
Okay, fantastic. My gosh, typically when we were putting these wing talks together, we're talking about doing them monthly, and people were asking, this might be too often, we won't have enough to talk about. Like, we're compressed for time today. We have so much to talk about. We have a very limited amount of time. So I want to get on to Darren now. Darren, you are going to help us out with this whole understanding the radios and INAV, and I guess the big question is what will work with INAV with radios?
Pretty much anything. if INAV will talk to the receiver, it will work with INAV. So this is my personal point of view, is what's the best radio for INAV? The radio you're most comfortable with. As long as it works, you've got enough channels that you need, you've got enough switches, then that's the best radio for you for INAV. There's no sort of right or wrong answer. It's all down to personal preference. If you like Jetty, use a Jetty. If you've got the money for a Jetty.
I mean, I think there's one limitation. At least your radio has to support any receiver that has a serial output, because we don't have PWM inputs on flight controllers anymore.
Yeah, that's
what,
you
need a converter.
I was basically saying. If INAV can understand the receiver, then it's fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, there are some things that you can look at to make the experience better. Maybe if you are limited, like I did mention the DX6i earlier. Obviously, that was a joke. I would not recommend that for INAV because it has basically 6 channels. It would be extremely limited, especially if you're into things like long range or you want multiple flight modes. It's just really not a well-suited radio.
We had some guy who posted about the DX6i about 2 months ago, and he had a whole long list of how he's planning to use it. He had to figure out combinations of things in order to get all the flight modes to work. And then someone just said, "Why don't you just buy an OpenTX radio and save yourself all?"
Yeah, I think I remember that. That was probably a bit more than 2 months now.
Yeah, maybe
I think that might have been a guy called Tracy.
It's Tracy.
And, yeah, he actually went out and bought a Radio Master TX16S and hasn't looked back. But that's the thing is, people. You've got a couple of different types of people that come to INAV. You've got people that are brand new to flying FPV in general. You've got people that come from quads. You've got people that come from line of sight. So there's a whole multitude of people coming in. If they're coming from line of sight, they may have radios like Spektrums, or they don't really need so many switches or options on the radio.
Yeah, for a long time, the DX6i was a very popular radio as a first radio for line of sight pilots, so they're very common.
Yeah, I mean that was what was actually recommended when I joined the flying club, was get a Spektrum because we can buddy with you. So I got DX6i.
Yeah,
it was 60 quid.
the DX6i was pretty well my first radio when I started, like 15 years ago, whatever it was. So when it had just come out.
yeah. So they've been going a long time, and are proven. But yeah, if you've got a radio that will work, there's no reason to buy a different radio. It's true with things like OpenTX. You can program in more things to get more features working, but it's not an essential. You can still do these things with other radios.
Like, for example, when we first started the group, a few months in, there's a young man named Marc Hoffman who joined the group, and he was talking about how his pure love for the FrSky. He's probably going to grab it right now. What is that one? The
FrSky i6 was it? But I think no, I can't grab it because I actually sold it a few months ago.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean I have switched to the TX16S and in January, I think, and I still can use my FrSky receivers with that radio still. So and I got a second radio, the X-Lite, for quad flying or just for ripping around with my speed planes, to have something more comfortable in my hand for aggressive flying. And with 2 radios, I don't need a third backup radio anymore, because I can use both radios for the same crafts. Both are set up in a way that I can just switch them on the same plane without any changes. And that's why I don't need the FrSky i6 as a backup anymore. I even sold my Tyrannus, so.
But yeah, Steve brings up a good point. A lot of people have bought that radio because it is really cheap. but it is actually quite reliable as well. The receivers seem decent, and so there's no reason why people shouldn't use it if they want to use it. So
we have posts of Marc Hoffman flying that thing 15 kilometers out with the FrSky transmitter. I mean, it was completely modified. It had a huge antenna on the back of it.
You mean my FrSky AI6?
Yes.
It was 4.9 kilometers, not 15.
Oh, I thought it was far, though, yeah.
People have gone very far with the FSI6, though. I think iForce 2D did 13 kilometers or something like that with it, so, yeah.
But no, I think iForce 2D used actually a signal booster on it to reach that.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. The biggest range I have seen just with an antenna mod on the FrSky i6 was, I think, 5.8 or 5.9 kilometers, close to 6 kilometers. It was the biggest range I've seen.
2.4.
And with that radio that actually has a very low power output. I think it only has around 25 or 30 milliwatts. It has not the full 100 milliwatts that are allowed. So yeah, with the external antenna mod, around a little bit more than 5 kilometers are possible. I just have modded one antenna to be outside. The second one was still in the handle. And yeah, with 4.9 or so, my limit was reached with that radio. With the Tyrannus, on the other hand, that's sending out full 100 milliwatts, I reached, I think, 11.6 kilometers with an X8R, also on top of 2.4 gigahertz. And now I have also, for testing, the Emergency Ghost system here, and I will see if I can reach that limit with that 2.4 system.
That'd be interesting to see, because that's LoRa 2.4, isn't it? So in theory, it should be better.
Actually, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Darren, back to you. So what you were talking about, we use just about anything for INAV then, right?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I don't really know where this radio chat's going, because it is such a wide there's such a wide range of radios, and there's no right or wrong answer.
Okay.
I mean,
I thought we put things in perspective today, as far as what we can talk about, as far as, you know, what happens when you want to get to the next level. Because somebody comes in, first things first, someone comes in who's a line of sight pilot. He's getting his first taste of INAV, and he wants to know if he can make it work with Spektrum radio. And where, you know, you might have a lot of planes that fly with Spektrum that have AS3X on them, and you don't need to sell your Spektrum radio, but you might need a different radio system for INAV if you want to make planes with INAV that works, right?
No, not really. I mean, all you really need is you can use a Spektrum satellite receiver, and it will communicate with INAV, and it will use a serial protocol. So, no, they don't really need to buy a new radio. Yeah, you're showing that. Oh, you're showing antennas, Mark. Have you flicked your screen on? Or you're muted.
Yeah.
And you're still muted.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't wanted to interrupt you, because I just wanted to show it to the chat, my antenna setup here. But yeah, you are still seeing me. I should share my screen instead, so you don't see what I do.
But yeah, so yeah, if someone's come from line of sight, unless they've got something like a DX6i, which only has 6 channels, if they've got something like a DX8 or DX9, DX18, or even one of those new Android things, there's no reason why they can't use that with INAV at all. They just use a satellite receiver, put that to a UART, or I believe even on Omnibus, which I hate Omnibus, but I believe they even had a plug for the Spektrum satellite receivers to plug straight into.
Yes.
So yeah, there's always options there. If they wanted to go long range, then they may need to look at other things. But I believe you can put a Crossfire on a Spektrum. If we use PPM or something like that, I believe it's possible. So just to go to INAV, you don't need to go to another radio. As long as you're happy, I think that's the biggest thing. If you want more than your radio can do, then yeah, look at something else. But again, it depends on what you want. If you're used to that ecosystem, you might want to stick with it rather than trying to jump to something new. So again, it's all very much a personal preference thing. It's like an OSD. It's like no one has the same OSD, so no one's radio setup is exactly the same unless they sort of download one of our models, which you know, that may be maybe one of the big selling points if someone is completely new. Is we do have our OpenTX models, so they can just put those on the radio, and that side of things already taken care of to an extent. But there's no reason why people flying INAV need to use OpenTX radio or anything like that.
Okay. So let's say somebody does want to get into the next phase of radios for INAV. Let's say that they're looking to upgrade, because a lot of people do this. They start off, they're familiar with their Spektrum radios, they stick with it, or their FrSky radios. Then they say, I want something more. So what is out there that's something more for them to look at? So we're going to narrow it down for people.
Well, it depends. Like I said, it depends what they've got now,
right.
And whether they want to stick with it. So if they have got like a Spektrum DX8, but they want more, maybe they'll look at is it the IX12 or IX16 or whatever it's called. Right. So they might prefer to stick with the brand they're used to and just get a higher up radio. It might not be the most cost-effective way of doing things because Spektrums are quite expensive compared to other radios, but there's no reason why there has to be a specific radio upgrade path. Okay. If people fly Futaba, they might want to stick with Futaba. They trust their reliability. Same with, you know, a lot of people are liking the Radio Master that Marc's got. People still do like FrSky, despite what's going on in everywhere at the moment. But yeah, it's personal choice.
So we're discussing now different types of radios. We're going into, if you were to get into the OpenTX radios or something in that line, you've got really right now what you have are two different things. You've got FrSky, which has the complete ecosystem, or you have Crossfire, and you can use that with a variety of different radios, including FrSky radios. But you have a lot of compelling radios out there, like the Jumpers and the Radio Masters. So, what's that like? What do we have when we look at all those different things?
Well, so to be honest, the radios you've just mentioned are all basically the same.
Yes.
If you look at them for a certain, there's a certain switch layout that you get with OpenTX radios that, you know, as from my first experiences of it was with an X9B. So one of these.
Yes.
That was my first experience. So obviously mine is modified, but that switch was here originally. So you just had, you know, switch SA, SB, SC, SD, EF, G, and H. You had two pots, you had two sliders. That was basically the standard OpenTX layout, and not a lot has really changed. You then move on to like the Horus type radios, which has an additional 6-way switch and 2 additional trims, and the Radio Master and the Jumper are very much the same as that. So the 6-way pot has been swapped for buttons, but it's all very, very familiar with all those radios, and OpenTX all sort of works the same. So the only real difference that you're going to get there is potentially quality of components, how it feels in the hands, because obviously they're all physically different, so they'll feel different. Yeah, there's subtle differences, but on the whole, the actual functionalities of the radios in how they work is all very similar. And to be honest, it's a really nice proven layout. It works well. There's plenty of switches, and yeah, it's a good system.
Okay. I mean, it's also interesting how that all developed. I mean, look at FrSky. You have the old X9D that's on the market for since 2015 or 2016 right now, and even today, 5 or 6 years later, it's still the baseline on the layout. And the only things that have changed is the main electronics, so the processor and memory to support the graphical displays, like on all the Horus type radios. And that's the next point. We have Horus type radios because they are all basically clones from the FrSky Horus. The hardware is nearly the same internally. Of course, the board layout is different, but you have the same processor, you have the same base of software. You still have the same switch layout and switch availability, as you mentioned before, the 6-position switch. On Radio Master, Radio King, and Jumper, it's this 6-position line switch. On FrSky, it's a potentiometer with 6 positions.
Well, if you remember, Mark, when the first Jumper T16 first came out, the multi-protocol module was actually external. It wasn't built in, and that ran the Horus firmware. So that shows exactly how much of the same radio it is. The components are different places on the board, but it's running the same firmware, so it is basically a clone. I'm not going to get into all that because they all sort of do it, so I'm not saying anyone's good or bad for doing it, but it's just the facts of the matter. It's the X9D was a clone of, I can't remember, it was a 9RX or something like that. You're on mute, Luke.
Oh yeah, sorry, the JRX X2 or something, 95, yeah.
So they've all done it. It's no one's innocent in this game. So I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but I'm just pointing out that it has happened. But anyway, sorry I interrupted you, Mark.
Yeah, all good. And I think, speaking of clones, I mean, the last 2 years were so interesting on the whole market development. I mean, look at not Radio Master, and at the Jumper T16, that was basically an X9D clone with a Horus type LCD. So I think the Jumper T16 was the first of its kind in this form factor with the bottom display.
Yeah,
and
but it was just a Horus clone. It wasn't a X9D clone.
Sure. It from the layout, it was an X9D clone, but from the hardware, it was Horus hardware in the X9D case, basically.
Well, yeah, Futaba case.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't remember which model it is, but it is just basically a Futaba case.
Yeah, okay, sure. But I was really skeptical back then about the quality, because the Jumper T16 was 120 euros or so with Hall sensor gimbals, and it was even below 100 euros with standard potentiometer gimbals. And actually, most of us were confirmed at the end from user reports that the quality was just crap. You had ribbon cables coming loose, you had switches falling off or breaking off and whatever. So many issues. Then there came upgrades, and then the Jumper T18 and the Radio Master TX16. And on every iteration of this radio clone type, they got better and better. And today I take my TX16S Max in the hands with the leather grips on the side, with the carbon style housing. It looks 3 times more, or just from the feel, it feels like it's 3 times the price than my old Tyrannus. Although the Tyrannus were double the price when it came out. It's really crazy how this market has changed in the aspect of quotes genuine radios and the clones of the cloned genuine. You know what I mean.
The genuine clones.
The genuine clones, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is really crazy. And you said before, some people still like FrSky. I mean, I don't hate that company. I'm not a big fan of that company either, because of what was going on during the last years. But yeah, I have the X Lite because for me it's the best form factor I can use for flying quads, and for me there's no alternative at the moment. I mean, yes, there is the TBS Tango 2, for example, with a similar form factor that has its own issues, and there is the Radio Master T Lite, where I cannot use really external modules because it needs a power mod to use anything reasonable externally. So yeah, at this point I went to the original. I said it in quotes again. but I think the X-Lite is pretty much original, right? It's not really a clone.
Xbox controller, but
yeah, okay. No, actually, if you take it by that, yeah, you can't really tell because the Xbox controller has 2 different positions for the thumbsticks, and the PlayStation controller are both down in the middle.
Yeah, I was mostly joking, I have to admit.
Yeah, sure. You could say they cloned the Turnigy Evolution, but without a touchscreen.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to accuse them of that. Someone would have had to have bought the Turnigy Evolution to be accused of that.
What I like to say about this subject is that we get a lot of people who join the group that, you know, when they first start off, they're like, I'm getting my first AR Pro or whatever to set up with an INAV plane. And then about a month later, they're like, I'm on to my 5th plane already. My wife is furious with me. And, you know, I got to have it all. I'm in love with this INAV stuff, but I need a better radio system. And, you know, I'm already spending too much money. So to tell them, like, no, instead of spending $150, you really need to spend $500 to buy the best radio system from FrSky. This will get you by. You've got a very decent radio system with these Radio Masters or the Jumper TX18 or whatever it is you'd like to do. But there's some advantages that FrSky has up its sleeve we'll get into in the protocol part of this. But you know, I would say that it does fit a need, which is if you need something that's a decent, I mean, well, I'll put it this way. When I got into, you know, INAV, the only real radio choice you had out there was the D9X, whatever, the X9D radio system from FrSky, and that was, you know, that was like $250, and that was a monochrome screen. But now for $150, you got yourself a lot of choices with the Horus knockoff, and so, you know, it's good and bad in both ways. So I'd say whichever way you go, Marc's happy with his Radio Master, so you can definitely upgrade that. He's upgraded that thing to the extreme now. I mean, it has LED lights and stuff like that inside of it. But
I mean, the
now,
LED
as far
lights,
as the going into the actual add-on modules, things like the Crossfire, because Crossfire gets a lot of attention. It seems to be like the hot ticket now is for people when they get into this is to get a Radio Master or a Jumper, and they put a Crossfire module on it and don't look back. So what do you have to say about the Crossfire modules and the whole Crossfire?
Well, first, I'd just like to address a couple of points. You were mentioning the Radio Master, and to be honest, when a lot of people come on the group, if you turn your screen on, Marc.
Yeah, screen share. Yeah.
Turn your mic on, Marc.
I didn't say anything. Just continue. If I do silently put something in my camera, don't worry. I just show something to the chat also.
I thought you were showing the group.
Yeah, but
Radio Master.
Yeah, that's my
the
only
LED lights. You see, I was saying that he's modded this thing to the extreme, so you can see the LED lights flashing inside of their.
Actually, that's the only modification I did, because the radio came this way. It's the Max version with the CNC parts, and there's a funny story behind these LED lights. There was a guy in the Radio Master user group who totally freaked out when someone posted this LED mod with a Banggood link. And he said, nah, that's all bullshit. This will mess with your gimbals and all that stuff. And we had hours-long conversation full of rant of this guy. And at one point, I thought, hey, it's just €8. Let me order one and just put it in and show him, hey, it's all fine. This was the main reason for actually. I don't think if I will keep it, but yeah, it's in there for 3 months now. So I don't know. Maybe I will replace it with this default spacers because I like it when the gimbals are a little bit lower. But that's, by the way, a really nice thing I like about the Radio Master. They officially allow modifications of the radio. That's a good point. I mean, the LED mode is not allowed because you have to solder to the main board, but you can replace and repair and modify everything you want on these radios, and you don't lose your warranty as long as they are approved parts. I mean, imagine
and as long as you want to ship it back to China for repair, right?
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, imagine your FrSky Horus radio has a defect, a loose switch, or display is malfunctioning. You have to pack it, you have to send it over to them, and then you wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks until you get a repaired radio back. And if something with the Radio Master is wrong, you write a few minutes with the chat, and they send you a spare part, you install it, and you are done. And that's what I really like compared to the big players.
Or for me, I could drive 20 miles out to Brea and drop it off. Yeah.
But no, that's a good point. Customer service is a good a good thing to have. So yeah. But yeah, back to where I was before Mark pimped out the screen.
Mark, remember you're tired. You want to stay quiet. Okay.
Right. So yeah, I mean, if someone comes to the group and says, right, I'm looking for a new radio, I've got this sort of budget to spend, I will always recommend the Radio Master, because I think for the money, it is the best bang for the buck you can get. It's about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I had a friend's Radio Master here. I was setting up on a plane for him, so I had about a week to play with it, and it feels absolutely fine, and using it was absolutely fine. It's not going to feel like a Horus, and it's sort of comparable, I guess, to an X9D. It's that sort of level of quality. The only things that I didn't really like on it were the screen in bright sunlight. I thought didn't really show up too well, and also I hate the jog wheel. I just find that skips all the time. But for that sort of money, I'd put up with it. It's everything else. I mean, those things you hardly use, to be honest. When you're actually flying, they don't really come into it. But I would still always recommend that radio. If someone says, right, I've got about £150 to spend on a radio, what can I get? Because they'll get the most features for that money, and they don't have to worry about ribbon cables falling out.
I think that was a TX16S, right?
Yeah, TX16S. It wasn't the Max, so they may have addressed it on the Max.
Yeah, so between the standard TX16S and the Max version, there's a huge difference. The jog die is completely different. The screen was upgraded with better sunlight visibility. It's still not perfect. I still sometimes have to hold my hand over it if the sun directly smashes to on the screen. But yeah, it's a whole different level. But that's what I expect for a radio that costs about €200.
Exactly. But
compared to 130.
A hell of a lot of features for that money, and just having two things that you have to sort of put up with, worst case, it's really not a bad investment at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that Mark was going back to about 2015 was when the X9D came out. So we have 2015 and 2021, and if I can get it on the screen, you can see, other than the shape of it, all the switches are basically the same. There's a 6-way switch at the bottom, but other than that, it's basically the same layout. So nothing has really changed.
If I got that correctly, that red slider at the bottom of the Horus, that's the only thing the Tyrannus and also the TX16S don't have, right?
Well, this is the X20S tandem, not the Horus. So yeah, this slider is new. This is like a 6. Well, it's actually a 7-way because you can turn it off as well, and it has 2 momentary switches on the back. But other than that, it's the same as an X9D.
What's that third gimbal that it's got?
Third gimbal?
Yeah, I've seen that.
This?
No. Oh, is it the X10 or X12 or something that has the third gimbal?
Oh, the X12 has a little jog gimbal here.
That one doesn't have it.
No, this is just a push button.
I see.
So so the X20 actually has a few more buttons than the Radio Master, for example, than other Horus-style radio, because the extra push buttons at the back and the slider is extra on this one.
You got those two momentary switches and that slider.
Yeah,
that's the only difference between a Horus or a Radio Master jumper.
Plus, it has a touch screen and also has motion sensor in there as well.
Oh yeah, it has a gyro built in, but touchscreen. The Radio Master has a touchscreen. It's just not active yet because OpenTX doesn't support it at the moment. But yeah. So right, we were getting onto modules.
Crossfire, right?
Right, yeah. There's nothing wrong with Crossfire. It's a really good system, so I can understand why a lot of people use it and swear by it. I don't think that necessarily the bad blood between them and R9 is quite fair, because R9 is again a capable system, works absolutely fine. But yeah, I can understand why people like Crossfire. Henrik mentioned the support he got from TBS when he had a faulty product and stuff was sent out. I've also seen Josh had an issue, something was sent out to him, he got it next day from China at no cost to him. So the support you get from TBS is actually spot on. So yeah, a good company.
You should also say, like, when you have a competition between Crossfire and FrSky, it's kind of, even though my feeling is that TBS is far better at multi-level marketing than, social media
marketing.
Yeah. It's almost like that, but no, it's social media marketing. I just think that FrSky is a better engineering company, but they're not very good as far as online marketing is concerned. Whereas it just seems to be like the it thing. It's like Apple was a few years ago. Everybody had to have Apple products. That's the way that TBS is. It's just kind of like the it product to have for the Crossfire. But when you have competition, everyone benefits, because what happens is it drives competition, it drives prices down, and it drives innovation. And so the thing is that you can't count on FrSky, and we're going to get into, after Crossfire, we'll talk about what FrSky has to offer and why you might want to consider it, why you might want to spend maybe a couple $100 extra to get a FrSky radio, like the one that Darren had in his hands.
Sorry, what was your question originally about Crossfire?
No, I was going to say that I was just making the point that there's competition between these two, and the competition is healthy, and that we're going to, kind of go over all the Crossfire, why it's a good system. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is the system have right now. But there's a lot of hate for FrSky because in the marketplace right now, because in particular, the notion is that they switched over to something that is not so much open source, something that's a little bit more closed down system where you can't copy it as easy. So copying, I guess the problem that they had was FrSky openly supported OpenTX's project for a number of years. And they also, what they got in return was they've got somebody stealing their radio layouts, as we've went through, and then we've got other people who are making the FrSky module knockoffs they put into their quads and things like that. So they were kind of like losing sales on both ends. So they decided that when they switch protocols, some of this is going to be locked down, and now they're somewhat moving away from the OpenTX project with introducing their own version of something similar but more graphically oriented, which is the FROS. No, it's not FROS. It's the Ethos. Thank you, Ethos system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how much we want to get into the politics of it, because at the end of the day, people should just use what works best for them. Forget the politics side of things. But I understand what you mean about the TBS marketing side. In my head, it's sort of like if you watch an old school American film, you have like the jocks, And it seems like Crossfire or TBS have that sort of mentality, and it's sort of like go team type thing, and everyone will stick up from no matter what.
Right.
And we have seen, like in the group, people have had problems with TBS products, but the attitude is, oh, it's your fault, it's not the products. It's like I think it was Wilhelm had a Crossfire module with an antenna, and it's actually designed that you don't undo the nut. It's got a cover over it. You're supposed to just be able to rotate it by 90 degrees to go from horizontal to vertical orientation.
It's called the Crossfire Micro V2.
And everyone was screaming at him, no, you're supposed to take the plastic cover off, undo the nut, and then rotate it. But in the TBS manual, it said you just rotate it. You don't take the cover off unless you want to actually physically change the antenna. So I feel like there is a bit sort of jock attitude with TBS, but by the same token, they do have good support. They make good products.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that comes more from the quad side of things. I just see more of that. You watch sort of Mr. Steel videos or whatever, you do see that sort of attitude in there, I guess. But yeah, I fly this. I like it. It works well. It's got over-the-air updates. So when it first came out, it was the first thing I knew about that actually did that. All the receiver modules are firmware is stored on here, so you just power up your plane. It automatically will update the receivers. There's a lot of really good things with it. And if you do go for the whole ecosystem, you can use like the goggle module. It will actually send back the VTX antenna RSSI, so it will actually change the power of your video transmitter based on the receive power. So there's a lot of cool things with it. Henrik's just mentioned the antenna thing was a certification issue. The antenna thing was bullshit. I'm just going to say that now. It was about this. This is a semi-rigid dipole. That was where all the trouble sort of started. This is a dipole is a very old antenna design. It's semi-rigid. That's where it all came from. And Trappy has actually confirmed that. It was nothing to do with anything else. It was just toys out the pram over an antenna. So yeah, I'm not going to go down that path anymore, but that's
well, the question I do have for you about the Crossfire, you said 12 channels. Is it stuck to only 12 channels?
By default, it's 8 channels, and it does have 12 channels. It's optional, and I believe there is a slight latency drop with 12 channels. Marc mentioned that it potentially is capable of 16 channels, but the latency drop is quite high. And I've also heard rumors, I can't remember who told me, that TBS are going to update or make a firmware update which will allow you to use more channels, which
you can that's what I got from someone who is very close to TBS, here from Germany, and you can request a firmware that is using 16 channels actually, but it will I think double or even triple the latency you get. I mean, for planes, it's not relevant anyway, but for quads, you don't want to use that.
So the question I have for you is that when you compare that to the Axis's 24 channels, is Axis really dropping latency when you get to those 24 channels?
I've not actually done any testing, but to be honest, I think latency is a little bit of a sales technique or a sales tactic anyway. At
least for fixed wing it is.
Certainly, but also I think if you're a quad, unless you're a racer, you're not really going to notice that much of a difference. The thing that's more important, I think, is actually consistency of frames, because your brain will actually adjust for latency. So if you're flying towards a gate, for example, you want to go around it, your brain will sort of preempt that anyway. There's always some sort of prediction going on in your head. So you can get used to latency so long as it's consistent. But Crossfire actually has horrible consistency, which is why things like ExpressLRS.
Trappy, that was Darren Lines.
It's actually, there's a guy, I can't remember his channel, but he's actually done, he's tested about, I think it was about 8 different systems for frame consistency. ACCST was terrible. Crossfire was surprisingly terrible. It was better than ACCST, but I sort of expected it to be at a really nice, consistent level, but it was all over the place.
Yep. But actually, Darren, that was already addressed on Crossfire with a few firmwares ago. And especially with Crossfire Shot, that shouldn't happen anymore because it's synced with better synced with the radio. So that latency differences shouldn't matter anymore. And by the way, the latency difference on the RC link is so small, even as a pilot, you would never notice if there are fluctuations. The bigger problem on the RC link latency changes is that the feed-forward value, especially on quads, has to adopt to that, because if you have frame skips suddenly, then quads can behave strangely and get some twitches in their feed forward or set point derivative, what it's actually in the background. So this is the bigger issue than the latency you have on your control link as a user.
Okay, but you sort of agree that consistency is more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's why sort of Tracer, they see a massive improvement in that because the consistency was massively improved. And also Access has got very good consistency with decent latency as well. But yeah, so long story short, there's nothing wrong with Crossfire. If people want to use it, go for it. It's a good proven long range system. Absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Okay, good. FrSky, so we should get into that. What are your experiences and thoughts on FrSky, especially now that you have the new tandem, which that will work with just if you put the JST module in, forget what the letters they are, XMT, whatever, it will work with pretty much every single receiver across FrSky has ever made. It will go all the way back to D8. And so work with everything.
Yeah, I mean, when I've looked at this, I've tried to look at it from a perspective of completely ignoring anything in the history. It's just a radio with a firmware. I love OpenTX. I think it works brilliantly. There's loads of stuff you can do with it. And I can understand why people are hesitant that they're going away from open source, especially when they put a lot of money into OpenTX. Let's not forget that. They put a lot of money and resources into OpenTX. But by the same token, I can understand them wanting to protect their products. So when I'm looking at it, I'm not really looking at it as a competitor to OpenTX or anything like that. I'm just looking at it as if I was looking at maybe a Futaba or a Spektrum. It's just a different system, and at the moment, it's more a replacement for FrOS. Which, if you bought a Horus, it would have come with FrOS. The only difference is at the moment there's no OpenTX version for the X20. Whether that changes in the future, who knows? I certainly can't say. But looking at it, it is a good system. I'm not going to bullshit. It works well. It's not just for line of sight pilots, which a load of people have said. And pretty much anything you can do with OpenTX, you can do with eWth. There's a few exceptions, or at the moment you can't use Lua scripts. That's the biggest one. There's things with the way that global variables that work that is sort of different at the moment. But one of the things that I've seen over the last week is there's a GitHub group for eWth, and the main developer is very active on there. And if you come up with an idea or a suggestion or a bug, he's within a day or so he's on it. I've already put a couple of suggestions through that are already in the firmware, and I've only had the radio since Monday. So
that's awesome.
It is a very active firmware with regards to bringing it up to date. And what I really like is the fact that they're actually listening to RC pilots. People are going on there saying, I want this on the radio. Can it happen? They're saying, actually, yeah, we can do this. Let's implement it. So that is, I think, is a very positive thing.
They've learned.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's where it is the guy who actually, from the way I understand it, is one of the main guys who developed OpenTX, and he's been told, build us a firmware. He's just going at it. So it's not like we've seen with older stuff, maybe from FrSky, where you know, like the frame problem, or that where people were losing multi-thousand-pound gliders because a servo locked in position, and it took 4 years to fix it. That it's not that situation. It's someone's come up. Yeah, take me for example. I came up with a suggestion for logical switches, and it was implemented and in the firmware 2 days later. So that, and it's not just me. There's quite a few RC pilots who are making suggestions about the way things work. So, for example, we can have multiple curves now on inputs and all this sort of stuff. There's lots going into it, and it has a lot of potential. So at the moment, I'm only really seeing positive things, and I'm not saying this to push the brand or anything like that. It's just my observations. If people want to use it, that's their own business. But it does look positive.
So for a guy who is coming in and is looking at buying a radio system, and you have on one side, you can get the TX16 or 18 or Radio Master or whatever it is. Does the Radio Master, I've never owned one before, does it have the Crossfire module built into it?
No, you can buy one that comes with a Crossfire micro module, I believe. Okay. It was an option, it came as an optional extra, just plug it in.
So it's an external module you plug in?
Yes,
yeah,
for the TX16S.
There was a pack where it was bundled with the radio.
Okay. So again, you've got, I guess the big advantage that they have with that is you also have the 4-in-1, the multi-protocols, which Darren has a great video explaining how to update that from, so you can fly all your old hobby drones and just about any plane out there that uses the cheap controllers. You can work with your radio. You can also get those multi-protocol modules and put them on the back of your FrSky transmitters. But this one is different in the respect that this is the first radio system that they came out with from FrSky that actually has 900 megahertz built in. So it's not an external R9 module that they're using, R9M module. It's actually built into the radio system.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Jumper actually did it before. They got the 5-in-1 with, but you can't use them both at the same time, as far as I know. So yeah, they actually call the series the Tandem. So it has 2.4 gigahertz and 900 megahertz, and they're both built into the radio. It's two separate modules. Each one has an internal and external antenna. So I believe the 2.4 goes around the screen and the 900 goes around the handle, or you can use external antennas so you can orient them as you wish. But the idea is that you use them both together, both on the same model, as a redundancy system. So I've got my big extra up there. I'm actually going to, when I wire that all together, I'm actually going to use that on that big extra. Yeah, it's a nice sort of, if one of your radio receivers goes, then you have a backup.
Right. So what you're looking at then is if somebody is looking at this whole system, and they can, right now, I know this is all fairly new and we're just getting our hands on it for the first time. And it's just hit the market here in the last month or so where people can actually get their hands on it. So, meanwhile, the stuff like the Crossfire and the Radio Master radios, all that's been out for a while. It's all been proven. But you've got something here that is fairly, I say, compelling in the respect that you've got 24 channels and you got built in. And one thing we haven't discussed is like what's coming out next is in July, they're coming out with the same radio system, but it's going to have HD video built onto the monitor. So it's 720p video, I believe, right?
To be honest, I don't really have any information on that yet. I've heard from my contact at FrSky that it will be an HD system. It's a FrSky system, and I believe he said it should be compatible with other systems, but that's all I know.
Okay.
That's the only information. I know in the top of the radio there is, if I pull the little flap off.
I mean, I guess if it's compatible with other systems too, then this will only be a Fat Shark, Sharkbite, but not DJI.
I've no idea. I would imagine not DJI, because people moan about proprietary, but DJI are pretty much the kings of proprietary in the hobby. Everything they do.
I mean, you could easily check that by looking at the RF receiver for the digital FPV system that is integrated, because DJI has to have a full power transmission also to work, because the DJI goggles also send with the full power to the craft and don't only receive. And if it's only a receiver module in the radio, then DJI will never work.
No. But, well, it depends, because one of the things that is up in the top there is looks like a micro HDMI blank. So it looks like if there's HDMI out on the digital system, you could probably just plug it in and it will display on the screen.
That's
so. I don't know. I mean, the sort of.
Is that an inside scoop you have there, Steve? That's the plan.
It was on their website. I mean, reading.
Oh, okay.
Well,
yeah.
This is where I'm confused. It said that there's an HD video system, whereas that's only an HDMI plug. And to me, they're two different things. So I think there's more to the story than that. And I have sort of heard that they are working on their own HD system.
Right, with zero latency and 720p, I believe, is what it is.
The zero latency, I think, is bullshit. I think that's you're never going to get zero latency.
Well, I mean, if they say 0 milliseconds of latency, and that still gives them, what, 500 micros or nanoseconds or whatever, that might be possible.
I mean, if you measure the latency from antenna to antenna, then it's true. I mean...
Yeah. So, anyways, it's interesting. They're trying some interesting things out. But how have you found Access? I know both of you guys have been working with Access modules. Have on your planes. How has it been so far?
Oh, I love Access. I think it's brilliant. The over-the-air updates. I mean, if anyone's used Crossfire, they know how cool it is to have over-the-air updates, and if you've got a receiver buried in foam, then it's really useful. And the fact that you can just change settings as well. I mean, if you're used to FrSky stuff in the past and you using FPort, you usually have to flash a different firmware. With Access, it's just a ticking a box and it changes everything for you. There's no need to worry about FCC or LBT anymore, because it automatically checks what the transmitter module is and uses that. So there's a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, I really like Access. It's not necessary features. People are perfectly happy with ACCST, but the fact that I got to try it out and use it, I enjoy using it. So it's not a necessity, but it's cool. What about you, Mark?
I mean, I also use it for Orion now, so I have it on my R9 system. But actually, in my case, I use Access on old hardware only. So I've upgraded all my old receivers. I cannot use the full feature set. Like my R9 receivers are no OTA, so I have to update them still with the cable connection. My RXSR receiver, I just bought a bunch of them, because I got 3 used ones for 25 or 30 euros or so. So for an RXSR, it's pretty cheap, and it still works. But I think for the future, especially for 2.4 gigahertz, I think I will go with the M Plus and what's the other one with the single antenna? There's a very cheap, small one.
The M Plus is a replacement for the XM Plus, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And then there's the
but the difference
MX,
is,
which is the MM replacement.
Yeah. Wait a second. The MX is the replacement for the RXSR with dual antennas.
MX is R9, isn't it?
No.
Because SX is R9.
Okay, whatever. I've looked at two small 2.4 gigahertz receivers, and I think I will buy a few of them just for my quads to upgrade them. And for R9, I will switch to the Archer series on long term. But for now, the R9, the classic one, the R9MM, just work fine as they should. So I don't see an urgent change, but for newer builds, I for sure will get the new Archer series. And yeah, as Darren already said, I'm happy to get OTA updates. It's so nice to have the ability to switch between F-port and S-port, because if I get a F4 flight controller, then I need either inverted F-port or on the receiver itself, or I just switch to S-bus and S-port connection instead, so I can do that on the fly. I don't have to reflash, and that's especially useful for R9MMs. I have to update via wire otherwise. So yeah, I also like it, and I had no problems till now. Absolutely no. I've not experienced a single phase save yet, not even on 2.4 gigahertz. I mean, I'm not doing long range, but just recently with the drift, I was around 5 kilometers away or so, 5 to 5.5 kilometers away, and that was just with 2.4 gigahertz on the X-Lite, and wow. I was really impressed, and I had no phase save, and that was further than I was able to go before with ACC ST, and I've not changed the receiver in the drift.
Interesting. Fantastic. Before I forget, there's website Horus RC that they came out with a bunch of flight controllers back in 2019 that I guess didn't sell well. So they have, one of them they've got a few, but one that caught my eye was an omnibus that has an F7 on there. It has a built-in R9MM receiver on it. But you have to use access with it, even though you can flash it back to ACCST. People have tried and they've ruined the boards trying because they're so small. So you need to stick with access, but those are about $35 and with free shipping. So it's just insane for the flight controller and the receiver. Now that I mentioned it, it'll sell out in about a day or so.
I don't know, it is omnibus.
Nothing wrong with it.
The only thing I'm waiting for actually is that we will get a 4-in-1 multi-module update that supports Access 2, because that's my only limitation, that I cannot fly my 2.4 systems anymore with the TX16S. At least not the RXSR.
There's FrSky X2 protocol on multi-protocol. I'm sure that's ACCST version 2.
Yes, but my RXSR are running on Access now.
Ah, right, yeah, sure.
They are running on Access for my X-Lite, so I cannot use this, at least these crafts with my TX16S. So that would be nice if Access support would come to the multi-module. That's the only limitation I have right now.
It's going to be interesting. Oh, also, we should mention that they just got an announcement today that the Maytech F765 is being discontinued because they can't get 765 chips anymore. We're having a problem getting that.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a shame. Has it been confirmed if they're going to bring it back afterwards, or like when the shortage stops, or is that just it for the F765?
The interesting thing is they have put the AOL marker on the website, but it's not listed in the end of life category yet. So they have not moved the flight controller. So there is hope. Let's hope it will come back. Because
at the moment it's the most advanced flight controller we have. So it's a bit of a shame if they discontinue it before.
Oh, but Luke, you're wrong. There is another flight controller in the market that's a 765 as well, also made by FrSky, that has an R9MM module built onto it as well. So
I see.
Yes,
the pilots, those are still available.
But keep in mind,
with my F765 wing, thank you.
But keep in mind they use the same processor. So if the processor is not produced anymore, then FrSky can also not deliver for long.
It's actually a slightly different processor.
It's different. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't. It's not the exact same processor. It's got less flash on board, so it's only 1 gig or 1 megabyte of flash rather than
So
2.
no autopilot.
No, RG Pilot will work.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the same as an F405 as for regards to memory and that sort of stuff.
The F405 has 2 megabyte of flash.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point. Only F405 and F765 flight controllers with 2 megabytes are actually supporting autopilot currently. And even the old PX4 I have with autopilot right now has only 1 megabyte flash, and it's already deprecated, and they say they have feature limited it. So I don't think that a 1 megabyte F765 will support autopilot officially. Anyway, the first thing I did today when I read this message is order an F765 from Banggood, because they are still on stock and I need one for my XUAV cloud setup.
Yeah, I'm up right now because...
I'll probably be getting a few, because until Henrik gets his way with the H743, there, you know.
They still got lots of those.
Yeah, still got lots of those.
I have a feeling that maybe this will put a little bit of pressure to the INAV devs right now.
Yeah.
Because now they are really under pressure to get this H7 support finished.
It looked like there was preliminary support for the 743 in 3.0, or was that did I read that incorrectly?
They are still working on it, and not all features are working, but I can have a look. Maytag. Oh wait, I have to enable unstable releases, of course.
Oh, I didn't actually look at the releases. I only looked at the release notes for 3.0.
No, I just checked. It's still no H743 on the list for the release candidate, at least.
But, yeah, that's what they say is H7 is available in the source repository, and target hex files we release as targets mature. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah. But
soon.
At least in the past month, it was only Konstantin, I think, who has worked on the H7 code. But right now, also 1 or 2 other developers jumped in and help here on some parts of the code. So there is still a chance, at least, that we will see it till 3.0 final release. But yeah, maybe if they need some extra time, maybe they just push the release 1 or 2 weeks back just to get it ready. We will see.
We're going through a worldwide chip shortage right now, so it surprised me it's taking this long for it to catch up to this, even though that these chips are made on like the worst nodes that there are.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that the global chip shortage isn't really affecting the kind of chips we're using, because we're using STM32s, which are I would have imagined completely disconnected from, you know, the high end x86 and whatever CPUs, but maybe
the demand is going through the roof for these things. It's just, you know, there's more and more products every day. It's not just flight controllers; there end up medical equipment and automotive and even consumer products. So yeah, it's and I don't know. I guess these factories are just only have so much capacity that they can put out right now. Plus, I've been noticing the cost of everything is going up. I mean, amazingly, even on AliExpress, things that were $15 are now $25.
I mean, I have bought F411 WSE flight controllers in the past for around 30 euros, and now I have to pay 47 for the same flight controller. Yeah. So that's a massive price increase.
I thought that was just us, but I think it's the cost of electronics. And I mean, they were kind of mentioning this a couple months ago, like the cost of everything is going up, and they're trying to hold the prices back with Maytag, but that it's finally now catching up. So they have to pass the costs on to us. So
yeah. I also because I just recently got a set of Ghost. The emergency RC Ghost module and receivers for testing purposes, and I talked to the CEO from Immersion RC, and he also told me that he is heavily affected too on this chip shortage since a few months already. So that's the reason why there's the how's it called? The power play is out of stock everywhere. It's really hard to get. I was happy to get a used one.
Do you know what chips they use? Do they use STM32s or is it ARM chips?
I have no idea what they use. Sorry.
I know that ARM chips and those kinds of chips were affected. I just didn't imagine that things like STM32s and 80 megs and that kind of thing would also be affected, but maybe.
I think the Ghost system is still in production. There's no issue as far as I know. It's only the power play because of the video chip, I think. They can
video chip. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The power play, that's this external DVR. They can deliver, but even for the Ghost, he said the hardware prices went up a lot, the production prices went up a lot, and he really struggles to keep the prices, and maybe even our RC Link prices will raise in the near future.
Interesting.
No, it must be like the Broadcom module in there then, or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I think the main problem is because these companies have less capacity, or the production companies have less capacity to produce their main stuff that's mostly used. They have to focus more on that and die down the production of other things even more to get the really important stuff out. I mean, I think our flight controller processors are not high priority for international products, for generic products worldwide.
So speaking of protocols, you held up the Ghost, and so you guys are going to have, there's one thing we'll just touch on briefly. You guys are located in the UK, actually in Germany. Marc's in Germany, the other two are in the UK, and I'm in the United States. And there's an outfit known as ExpressLRS, who the developers are based out of Australia, and they are we're not all able to get on and talk to each other at the same time. So you guys are going to record a separate video with them and get more involved with explain the whole ExpressLRS system.
Yes, that's the plan. We have no time schedule yet. We have to meet up with Wesley at least, and then we will see that we make a separate video about that with an interview, like we did in the past with Andrew for the first time. So
great.
Yeah. So we will have a separate. We will have a separate discussion about ExpressLRS, because that's still a really hot topic, even in our group.
Even in the group. But you also have Ghost, so maybe at some point we can move on to those topics, not for today, but at some point in the future, and kind of discuss it a little bit more. You can discuss ExpressLRS, but have you had enough experience with the Ghost yet to really? I saw you were just starting to use it like in the last week or so.
Yeah, I have not flown it yet, so I just set everything up, updated the firmware, and yeah, the Ghost is really, really easy to handle, actually. I mean, the binding process, the receivers will start in bind mode from factory, so I have never pressed the bind button yet. You update you install the drivers and the updater on your PC, update via USB. The only downside that was confusing me a little bit on the Ghost system was that the full-size module needs to be powered by the radio to actually update it over USB, while the small module that's back there and somewhere for the light radios can be powered by USB only for updates. And but that's on purpose for some reason. There are some issues with the electronic if you power it on the USB only. But yeah, like with Crossfire, connect, firmware update, fully automatically, even faster in Crossfire, faster than on Crossfire. You don't even have to rebind, just power cycle the receiver one time and it's connected and you can continue. And what's really cool is, because that's the first time I saw something like this. Wait a second, I hope my cable is long enough. Long enough, give me a second. So what's really cool is for the Ghost, there is this Ghost hybrid receiver that I have in the Talon 250G right now. And if I show it to you, So it's there on the side. I hope you can see that. The little white board on the red socket.
Yeah, see, something about that I just really don't like. My entire FPV flying career has been trying to separate the receiver and the video transmitter as much as possible. And that is exactly the opposite, having them on the same board.
The funny thing is, I'm not sure if that's because it is one bundle and because it is on the same board. They really managed to separate that. So you have
I can imagine they've done a good job with the filtering and that kind of thing because they know that they're going to be together and stuff. But
yes, because
it just feels wrong, you know.
Yeah, sure. I have just a little dipole antenna on there right now because I have to order a proper antenna with UFA connector I can put on the top or at the bottom of the plane. And I see absolutely no noise from the RC link, not even at full power. And this small VTX has 600 milliwatts output power. The only downside, and I was also talking about that with the CEO or with Immersion RC, is you cannot control it via INAV right now. Because it has a direct link between the receiver part and the VTX part, so you can only control it on the module itself or via by the Lua script. And not through INAV. But he thinks about it for one of the next updates because there is a separate UART pinout available on the board itself. So he could use that and allow you to switch between external tramp control or internal tramp control via the receiver. So I hope he will do that because this would be a no-go for me, for this receiver at least.
Great. Well, next time we'll maybe get more opportunity for you to test out that Dart, the Talon 250G, and give us more of a report on it. I know you've been flying that in the last couple of weeks. Your initial thoughts on that plane?
I like it. Like it flies manually. I had no flight controller in there, just a receiver. It flies really nice, but it has unfortunately the same issue like the ZOHD drift. Don't make a full throttle dive. It will lose control because the wings will flex. As you can see, this is without battery right now. I have the battery pack here. If I put the battery in, so I'm at full flying rate. And if you look at this now,
oh God.
And that's only yeah. So the rings are really flexy at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't really concern me too much as long as you know it's there and it's fine in normal flying situations. I guess it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think I just realized I have a problem with the carbon spar. Oh. Maybe during the crash I had the carbon spar broke because if you look at this.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have to check that. That doesn't look healthy.
So
maybe
did the crash happen before you did the full throttle dive?
Yes.
Or
that maybe.
So it may not even be a problem then.
I think so. I have to check that.
I don't know. It definitely didn't look right.
Yeah, that didn't look right, actually. Absolutely. I have to check that.
Well, guys, I think we've gone over like massively, so we need to probably wrap it up for now, and perhaps we can keep addressing the subject of radios, anything that we didn't cover in this and the next one. It's interesting. It's the first time we've had a show without a guest in about a year, and this has just flowed really nicely. There's a lot to talk about here. So thank you guys for pitching in, and I'm glad this is the really big time for INAV right now. So really appreciate your help and support in the group. And anything else you want to add before we sign off? Mark's looking very concerned.
No, nothing from my side. I was just looking at the last chat messages.
Okay. No, nothing in the chat messages. Okay. Okay. Darren looks disappointed.
I was just having a quick look at the chat. I don't know. I don't think there's anything else really to talk about with radios. I think
okay,
we kind of covered that one.
We sort of covered that, yeah.
Yeah. And this was also the longest Ring Talk we had yet.
Woohoo!
And we've still got people watching, so it can't be too bad.
People are actually watching us. I can't believe that.
They all fall asleep and the stream is just running.
When we started doing these, there were like 8 people who'd watch us. I mean, Marc was saying we had up to 16 people watching us at one point, and then we're back down to about 7 after a while. So thank you for everyone for staying up late to watch us. If you're in Europe, and if you're in the United States, thanks for taking part of the afternoon to be with us today. So on behalf of myself, Darren Lines, Luke Atabato, how do you pronounce your last name?
That was surprisingly good. Atabato. If you don't say it with the Italian flair.
I was going to say, that's Welsh, right?
I'm not going to say it with the Italian accent. Just not going to happen.
And then Marc Hoffman, who's obviously German. Thanks for joining us today, and catch us next month, third Sunday, and we'll have a banner up. We'll tell you in the future, like, we're the third Sunday of every month. We do the Wing Talk, and thank you for joining us today. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Okay, and